Have you ever lost your voice? I don't mean the frog in your throat, scratchy conversations, and everybody giggles a little thing. I mean, you haven't shown up for yourself the way you should. Why? Maybe because you have some self-doubts. Maybe because of external influences. Maybe some past trauma. That's impacting everything that you do today. And your voice is so important and can impact the world. Now, I won't be the person who stands on the soapbox today. That's why we have Manette here today. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself, why this matters to her, and why it should matter to you. Manette, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to hear your story.
So let me tell you, you know that your eyes, right, are called the window to your soul. Right? Your voice is the pathway, is the doorway of your soul. What you have here, your voice, who you are, travels from here to the world and connects. And that's how you are here and are here to fulfill a purpose that your voice, the one you were given, that you came and merged into the world with, is the voice that you need to make the purpose, to make the impression, to inspire, to ignite the world in the way that you have the power to do so.
I'm just like, I'm already, I feel like I'm at the edge of my seat, but I need to know a little bit more about where you're coming from. Like, who is this person who just touched my own soul with her voice? Who is this person? Tell me a little bit more.
Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my voice journey, which will work into who I am. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I was raised in the South, where little girls are perhaps not supposed to have such powerful, strong voices. And my mother looked at me one day with this glare in her eyes that she had inherited from my grandmother, who they claim could stop their children in their tracks with one look, and talk about the power of the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Voice. Manette, lower your voice.
Yeah.
And I froze. My mother was my world. I needed her approval, right? And so I decided, how do you react? You're 4 or 5 years old. How do you respond? What do you do? And so I tried humor because my father used that. And I said, "Is this low enough, mother?" And she, yes. Now, that's not the only time that happened. I have the memory of one of the times that happened. But slowly, I'm going to do this. I lowered my voice, and my voice came here. Now, I'm assuming you can still hear me because we have microphones. But what I've done is I have lowered my voice, not only in pitch, but I buried my voice down here in my throat. And this was the voice that I had for many, many years. It's not an unpleasant voice. It served me. I actually was very, what should we say, a little ambitious. Maybe that's why I was actually told to lower my voice. And I ran for offices in school, and I debated, and I did theater. But, on level with this voice. And it was the late 60s when I graduated from high school. I had wanted to do theater and sing. I sang in a choir. But it was the late 60s. Civil rights had become a very opportunity for growth in the world. The United States Civil Rights Act had been passed, but there had been, Martin Luther King had been assassinated, Bobby Kennedy. The Vietnam War was raging. We were protesting against the war using those voices. It was the second wave of feminism, and sisterhood was powerful. I went to work at the Texas legislature, where there was a young legislator named Sarah Weddington, who had just argued and won Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court case that made abortion legal. Anyway, I got to know Sarah and I pivoted and I went to law school.
Ooh.
And this was my voice. As I say, it's not unpleasant. And in the small environments in which I worked, it served me well enough. I became a prosecutor, prosecuting civil fraud, white collar fraud. And, courtrooms are not what you see on television. You're right there with the judge. You're right there with the jury. I could be heard. But then I went into corporate work. I worked for Dr. Pepper Company. I worked for PepsiCo.
That's fun.
And I would be at boardroom meetings, right, where I would offer my offering to the thought, to the process, my ideas. And I would get sometimes a tepid, and then not 2 minutes later, a man, I'm still down here, a man would say the exact same thing. And they go, "Oh, Joe, that's a great idea." Now, I do know this was the 70s. There was some misogyny going on for sure. But what I also have learned as I've gone back to the theater and back to study voice is that this voice here, nice and soft, does not express power, does not express confidence, express assuredness. And I have to admit that that was probably a part, right, of what was contributing to not being seen or heard or valued in terms of what I was seeing. When I did go back, I actually left corporate practice, started my own practice, where I joined a woman. We shared a midwife, and she knew both of us wanted to change, and she got us together. So we used to say our midwife gave birth to our practice.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's so beautiful.
And we took on, basically, our goal was to take on women clients. And I helped, because of my corporate background, help women form businesses and then represent them. Lynn was more of the litigator. We worked together in that way about 4 or 5 years. In the meantime, we both had children. And the idea was we would each work 4 days a week. Well, that doesn't happen in the law. Anyway, we looked at each other one day and said, you know what, this is as good as it gets. And I'm not enjoying this anymore. Law is virtual. Law is confrontation. Law is an advocacy business. And you're always in that advocacy mood. So we agreed together to close our practice. She went off and became a certified nurse midwife. And I have to tell you, jumping forward just a little bit and then we'll come back, she delivered my 4th child.
Oh,
so my
beautiful
ex-law partner divorced my first child. But in any case, I actually, when I closed up the practice, I became the executive director of a new ACLU chapter, American Civil Liberties chapter in Dallas.
Okay.
And I became their media spokesperson, still with this voice, this nice soft voice. But I was on radio where I had a microphone, or television where I had a microphone. But jumping forward, because I had children who were neurodivergent, and so I actually stayed home for a period of time, advocating, as you have to do for neurodivergent children.
Absolutely.
And when I decided to go back, I did not want to go back into the law. And I began to explore my world and my creativity again. And I went back and I began to study theater. And that's when they said, Manette, we really believe you have talent, but we keep losing the end of your sentences. We can't, you're going to have to speak up. One of the things you have to do when you study theater is you have to study voice. Voice work is the foundation of acting. What I had to learn to do, and I'm not going to, is I had to learn, and I'm going to have to do it here. I had to bring my voice up here.
Yeah.
I had to bring it up where it could be heard, where it could resound through this beautiful resonating chamber of your body, your head, your bony structure. And we can talk about that a little more later. But you have to learn to bring your voice up where it can be heard, right?
And I think I know everybody who's watching right now is just saying, Like I felt I had to just sit back for a minute, because you feel the change. It's a feeling. You can feel the change. So like, keeping in mind that it doesn't, like, we're not yelling. Like, when you've gotten yourself up to that space, like, that's not yelling. That's just you saying the things. And I want to say this just simply because I've spoke with a lot of people. Now, I'm not a voice coach, but I do help people show up. I do help people become visible in a way that feels aligned and comfortably confident. And they will say things like, well, if I speak in a certain way, then I feel like I'm yelling. And so I want to make sure that we kind of, maybe we just like set that on a shelf to take down as we discuss how you're
Well,
showing up now, because I
we
think
can,
that's
but I will tell you, when I began to work on my voice, I felt like it was hard for me to use that voice outside the theater because I felt like I was screaming. It's like, okay, I can use this voice in the theater. But then when I would go into my the world, it was
right.
hard for me to do that because I felt like, oh my God, I'm screaming. So you have to get used to that voice. It does actually can work a little bit at changing who we are. And we have to be aware. And I tell people when they begin to work on their voice, they need to tell people around them that they're doing this. Because people will like, what are you doing? Like, who are you? You know, because it changes how they experience you. It,
Right.
it can change how you come across, how you put yourself out there, right? And so we have to be aware that there's all kinds of things that are part of our identity, and our voice is clearly one. Now, one of the things I tell people who want to work on their voice is I never say a voice has to be fixed, right? We're born with this wonderful, beautiful voice. I'll tell you a really quick story. When I had my first child, and I had him at home, it was a beautiful birth, but he developed, it was a long birth because it was the first, developed jaundice, well, jaundice. So when the midwife came back, she said, we really need to take him in so that he can be observed, just to be sure everything's okay. Well, my mother was there. She said, you just had a baby, stay in bed. We're going to take the baby to the doctor. Okay. Well, I fell into a very needed sleep, right? But when
Yeah.
I woke up, it was dark and they weren't back. Right? I was kind of frantic. It was in the early 80s. There were no cell phones. I couldn't
Yeah.
call anybody. I called the doctor's answering service. They didn't know. I was just frantic. Well, not long after, thank God, my husband showed up and said, everything's fine. They just have him for observation. The reason I'm telling for this story is we got in the car, we raced there, and I was just desperate to get to my baby. You have to wash up and put on a gown and all this. And there was a sea of bassinets, these clear plastic bassinets, right, with all the babies with the same blanket and the same hat. They had, and you look at when I opened the door to the nursery, I heard my baby's voice. It still brings tears to my eyes. I had not had him for more than 24 hours. With all the babies in there, babies crying, I opened the door and I immediately heard my baby's voice and knew right where he was.
Yeah.
You come into the world, you emerge into the world with your voice, right? It sends chills through everybody in the room, but it's your voice. So when people say, I hate my voice, what I tell them it's because you have stopped, you have developed habits of using your voice that aren't serving you.
Mm.
Morgan Freeman, particularly many men will come, they want to have Morgan Freeman's voice,
I
right?
love Morgan Freeman.
And if you go too low, if you try to get Morgan Freeman's voice down here, you will bury your voice just the same way I did, right? Your voice, your pitch is yours, and you have to keep it. Morgan Freeman has been interviewed, and they ask him, where did you get your voice? And he says, and it's a little bit not true, he said he found his voice at Los Angeles Community College in theater school from his voice teacher. And what I say is, that's not where Morgan Freeman got his voice. He was born with Morgan Freeman's voice. What he learned how to do was to get rid of habits and learn to use the voice he had in a way that served him and that was true to who he was.
I think that is an absolutely accurate statement. And if he was asked where he found it, there's argument there, right? Where did you even rediscover the voice that was already yours?
Absolutely. And that's actually what I said. We're not going to create your voice, we're going to rediscover your voice.
Yeah.
Right?
I love, and honestly, I don't know any especially any mother who couldn't. You're right. You can tell, you know that your baby's voice, you know it. Even, I mean, even my husband said the one day he was up in, we went to visit him. He works at Costco. He was up in the staff room and we were just wandering around with her. Well, I guess she would have been a few months old, and no, she would have been about a year old because she was doing the da da, right? And I guess one of the people in his staff room said, looked at him funny because he went like this. He goes, "That's my kid." And they were like, "It sounds like every other kid." He goes, "No, no, that's my kid." And he comes down and that's his kid. You know, dad, you just know. And if you can tap into that, first of all, we heard it with you. We heard that change, that resonant change. And the way people receive you changes. And you express that in a lot of the different experiences you've had. You know, you're able to make things happen around you. But I think what I'd like to ask you about, that I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into, is how those internal changes that happen when you find that voice, that confidence, how that impacts yourself and the choices that you get to make in your life thereafter. Can we dive into that for a moment?
So let me tell you, we have what we call our voice, the sound of our voice, right? And then we say we have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
Seeming like we're talking about two different things, right? But actually, they're connected. Just the same way our brain and our body are connected. There is no brain body, right? Just like there's no heart body, there's no brain body. Everything works together. Well, what we've learned, and I actually have it here, I'm going to bring it out. She's gone, unfortunately. There's a woman who wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion. Her name is
Oh.
Dr. Candace Pert. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. She died in her 60s, much too early. But Candace discovered the opiate receptor. This book reads like a novel. I mean, I've never been so excited about learning science in my life. And she talks about, and she also talks about the fact that she had trouble getting credit as a woman in the
Mm-hmm.
lab in which she worked, and that journey, which was also very interesting. But what she discovered in discovering the opiate receptor is all the receptors that we have in our brains for the things we all have learned about: dopamine, serotonin, the neurotransmitters that work here. We have those same receptors practically all over our body, but particularly connected here,
Yep.
right? We have a gut brain, so that our thoughts, our feelings, who we are, right, is connected. We have thoughts here, but where do we feel them? We call them feelings, right? Because we don't feel love or hate or fear in our brains. That's where it's processed. We feel it in our bodies. If you will, if you'll say that, when we use the language, we say, "That touched my heart." Well, if you'll do this, if people will just kind of put their hand here on their heart
Mm.
for a minute and just imagine something that touched your heart. Your baby's face, maybe puppies and kittens on the internet, some beautiful experience that you saw or had. There's a warmth, there's a lightness, there's a feeling. That's why we say, "It touched my heart," right? This is where we feel it in our bodies. We also say, "That gave me butterflies in my stomach,"
Yeah.
right? And it's here, it's right above your navel, here, right here. Like when you're excited, I can just imagine something that you're anticipating, something that's going to happen. You're excited for it to happen. You're anticipating. You're going to race, and you're getting ready to race, or you're going off the high dive, or you're going onto the stage, right? And there's this woo, right? And we called it butterflies in your stomach. I actually heard someone speaking about speaking. We should all learn to do is chase butterflies, because butterflies in your stomach mean you're excited. There's energy, right? There's passion, right? That's also where we feel fear, right?
Fair.
That gives me butterflies in my stomach.
Yeah.
We also say that got me in the gut.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. And if you'll think about it, something that just, oh, this is where it hits. This is where it touches you. This is where we feel power. Ugh, right? We feel it here. So our bodies are where we feel our emotions. And this is where our voice lies. What we have done in our modern world, and it cuts off our sound and our voice, is we armor. We have armored against our experience. We have armored against the world. We have experiences we've had in our lives, different levels of trauma, things we want to protect ourselves from. And we actually hold in with the muscles of our body. We pull in here. That actually limits our voice. And I'll explain our voice. I'll explain why in just a second. But it protects us from our feelings. And when you're protected from your feelings, you're protected from that authentic connection to yourself, and you cannot authentically communicate with others when your voice, who you are, is armored and buried here. And
Right.
voice work actually is body work. If you'll see, this is my studio,
I love it.
right? And this is what I learned when I went to theater school and expected to work on my voice. I was put on the floor, and suddenly I was doing things that were like yoga and Tai Chi and things, as we learn to open and move our bodies in order to open ourselves to ourselves and to the world. Everything is connected here. And,
Yeah.
and we have to bring the voice up. We have to connect. It's here. It resonates. I'm going to tell you. So your vocal cords are here in your larynx. If you put your hand down here, you'll find this little bump, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your Adam's apple. Just very gently, you can move it back and forth.
Right.
That's your larynx. And inside there lie your vocal folds. And that sits right on top of your windpipe. And it's the vocal folds, the vocal cords that create sound. What happens is
Mm-hmm.
we breathe in through, the best is through your nose, because there's these turbinates that clear and filter the air. It goes down our windpipe. The vocal folds at that point are open at the top of the windpipe, right? It's called the glottis. The air goes in and out, and we breathe. When we're going to speak, the brain sends a message to those vocal folds to close. Close. How does that help? It's because the air goes in, our vocal folds close, and then to speak, the air has to come out, right? It builds up pressure underneath the vocal folds that forces them apart. And when it forces them apart, they begin to vibrate like and then like this too,
Yeah.
right? So these little muscles, these little cartilage actually muscles, and they vibrate here, right? Vibrating. And
Yeah.
these sound waves come up inside this oral cavity, and they begin to bounce off the hard surfaces of your jaw and your teeth, your hard palate, the bones of your sinuses, your cheekbones, your forehead, your cranium, down the back, through the ribs. Your whole body becomes a resonating bell, a resonating chamber for these sound waves. And these sound waves go out, they bounce against the hard surfaces around you, but what they do is they bounce into your listener. Your sound waves touch and vibrate the body of your listener. And then eventually those vibrations very quickly touch the bony little bones inside the ear that the brain translates into sound. So with your vibrations of your voice and your breath, you are touching, you are connecting to the people that you're communicating with. But and
I
so
love this.
to have enough breath to keep these vocal folds going, you have to be able to open these lungs fully and completely. The diaphragm has to be free to move up and down, to allow, when it goes down, to allow those lungs to fill. These muscles have to be open so the ribs can swing up and out. What happens is the diaphragm lies right here under, connected to, it's actually almost pasted to your ribs. Your ribs, they're here and they go down like this, right? And it's a dome-shaped muscle like this here. And what happens is, and this is usually, obviously, it's autonomic. It happens without us thinking. The diaphragm, when we breathe, it goes down. That makes space for the lungs to fill. And then when we exhale air, it just relaxes up. And it goes down and it relaxes up, right? And the reason we feel, you can't breathe into your belly. The only way you can breathe is into your lungs. But when that diaphragm goes down and is free to move down, it presses, because it goes down, it presses viscera, your intestines, and it just pushes them out a little bit because it pushes down and out, right? It pushes down and out. And if you're tight here, like we're taught we need to be comfortable, you're restricting the ability of the diaphragm to fully descend and fully fill up your lungs. The other thing is, if you'll put your hands here on the side, when this is open and you've learned to release these muscles, when you breathe in, you'll press in a little bit. You'll feel, when you breathe in, your ribs swing up and out.
Yeah.
Right? Up and out. So what's happening is, when we breathe in, the diaphragm goes down and the ribs swing in and out, up and out, so that there's space here for the lungs to fully fill with air, right? And then it goes down.
What's really interesting here is that throughout this conversation, like, I'm never really conscious about the way I'm speaking, but because we're talking about that, I'm becoming very aware of it. And there are certain things that I do and some things that I'm noticing that I don't do. And as I'm doing that, as I'm being more conscious of my breath, I'm yawning more, first of all. And so that's something interesting that we might want to kind of touch on briefly as people start to experience this. But I'm also like, my posture has changed as I'm being conscious about this. Like, my subconscious, typically if I go on a stage, my subconscious is already going to do this, but I'm being conscious about it now. And it's interesting because I think this is something that people can directly translate into the way they're marketing themselves on a stage, in photographs, or any sort of presentation like this, where you do need to use your voice, and how it does literally change your physiology as you're showing up, which will change the impact you're able to create. So two things, I guess, is, first of all, what's up with the yawning? And second of all, how, like, from your perspective, from your unique perspective, how does that posture change shift how messages are being received?
Well, I'm so glad that you're so aware that you've seen this, because actually it's kind of a chicken and the egg. By working on what Arthur Lesac, a great lion of voice work, he likes to call instead of posture, he calls it dynamic alignment. Because often when we say posture, we have this sense of, shoulders back, stomach in. We have this stiff, sense of posture. You have to have good posture. Go up against the wall, have posture.
Right.
But what we really need is this a more mobile ability to. I'm sure you've also heard of, like, you on a string, right? And so there's an alignment, right? But if we're like this, right, that's going to compromise here, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, if we're like this, where most of us are a lot, right, and that becomes, that all this whole apparatus is compromised. If you sit like this, a lot of women particularly have this, where we they do this, right?
It's the kid
Yeah,
hip. It's the
right.
kid hip.
Right. Then all of that affects what's happening here. If you put this out here, then you're putting tension. Tension, any stress is the villain to your voice, which is why a lot of breath work is body work, because we have to be aware of and know how to address the tensions we're holding in our bodies. In our jaw, we hold so much, and why I wanted to go from there is to the yawn. You may hear there's a number of voice teachers which will tell you to drop your jaw. That's so you create more space in here for this, this beautiful bell. But often when you tell people to drop their jaw, they create some force or tension. Right?
Yeah.
Right. And so what I like to say instead is can you just relax and release your jaw? Just release and relax it down. So you're not holding it in. Relax, release your jaw. And one of the ways we experience that is with the yawn.
Mm.
Yawn is really a golden thing for you. Now, when we yawn, there will be a little tension here. But just go ahead. What we want is what we call a professional yawn. Instead of like this, Fred, we want a little bit of.
Right.
So just, if everybody who watches this could do this, just not push, just like here, so you know that you're up and down. Whoa.
Yeah.
Now, when you do, your jaw will, and you'll actually, if you'll pay attention, the soft palate rises. You feel that in the
That is
back?
so cool.
In your throat?
If you're watching this right now and you're not doing this, start now, because like it's really cool. That's just the sensation you can get. And having studied linguistics, this is educating me more than you think it is.
So we have this hard palate. If you use your tongue, take your tongue back on the hard palate, and then you'll feel it gets spongy and it's a soft palate. So take your tongue behind your teeth, move it back, and you feel that little soft palate.
It's right where you can do the little.
The soft palate moving up and down is what changes your pitch.
That makes sense.
So, but when you yawn, though, that soft palate rises and it opens up the whole back of your throat, right? Which opens up this whole, what we call vocal tract, this whole oral tract. The other thing where we hold tension is if you'll take your thumb and put it up here, and again, just a little bit, don't hurt yourself. That's your tongue. Mm-hmm. Your tongue, what you see is just the top. The tongue is enormous. It goes all the way down here, and it goes all the way down a little bit down your neck.
Yeah.
And we hold tension in our tongue that closes this oral tract, right? Vocal tract. So we had exercises that we learn how to actually relax this tongue. So when you yawn, think about it. This whole area just opens and relaxes. The other thing, Author Lesek calls that a relaxer energizer. The yawn relaxes us.
Yeah.
Right? We breathe it in, the diaphragm goes down.
Everybody is yawning now. Because yawns are contagious.
It relaxes and we feel this relaxation move through our whole bodies. It also energizes us because it brings in oxygen and it brings in more air. So it's a relaxer energizer. Before you go on stage, before you turn on start, one of the best things to do is to yawn. It opens up your voice and it gives that message to your parasympathetic system that everything's okay. And we haven't talked about that yet in terms of right and all. But it's because all of this is here. And when we open and relax here, and we learn for that to be our default place, we know how to trigger, not fear, we learn how to trigger relaxation. And we go through the learning process of learning through how we do things on the floor and then bring it up to standing, how we can trigger relaxation so that we send to the little amygdala back here who's keeping us safe, right? The little lizard brain. We say, thank you. And if there's a fire or a siren or something, you stay there because I need you to protect me. If I'm going to
Yeah.
fall off the stage, let me know. But other than that, everything's okay. I got this, right? Because we can do that because it's here that we feel everything. We've learned to trigger that relaxation response.
It's what I'd like to. We're running low on time, which is both disappointing because there's so much more to learn, but also exciting because that means that we can take the next step in tapping into that and presenting in a way that will actually impact our internally, like make a really positive impact internally and externally. It will, change the way the world works by just changing the way we're showing up in these very they're micro changes that create macro results is what I'm seeing, and these are the first steps, but there's so much more that can be done to allow you to present in a way that allows you to achieve your dreams, to really get you to get those to realize your goals, to make them reality. So what do I want to do? Because I want to keep talking. So now I need if let's just say this, everyone. If you're like me and you want to keep diving in, please do. Comment. Reach out. We're not going anywhere. We will respond to your comments. We will engage with you and give you the resources and tools you need to take the next steps in showing up in a way that is going to be immensely impactful for yourself, your business, and the world around you. So
absolutely
keep chatting. The next thing I wanted to mention very briefly is that amazing artists like Greg Keeler from Blue Rodeo and Jason Mraz, they frequently talk about their relationship with yoga and breath work. In fact, Jason Mraz will stop his show to have the audience breathe with him. So just these are pretty prolific people. So if you want to be on their level, on their stage, this is where we start. This is the grounding time. Now, I'm sure that you have so much more to share, but I'm going to give you an opportunity now because I've got all the questions that I want to ask, but we don't have the time. Oh my goodness. Please share with the audience the next best way for them to move forward with this, because everyone watching, I know, has something to say. They may not be at the point where they're ready to take the stage. Maybe they are. Maybe they already are, but they want to improve. But there is a message, there is a story, and there is an impact that we are all here ready to make. And this is how we can move forward in a way that's the most productive and impactful. So I'm going to give you the stage. I'm just going to give you the stage here. Please share with the audience your amazing next message.
So, what Shauna just said in terms of your breath and yoga and movement and how our breath is connected, and I think I've shared with you how our breath actually and our sound make us connected to each other. I call my work your voice connection, because that's who we are. That's how we interact and go in the world. And whether you're ready to be on a stage, Shakespeare says, all the world's a stage and we are merely players. Whatever communication is going on in your life, no matter how intimate, no matter how spread it, your private relationships, sitting across a desk in your workspace, in the workroom, communicating to your children, right? And then in a club or in wherever you decide your voice can make a difference and you're brought, bring all of you, bring all of this, bring your full, powerful voice that you were sent here to create and change the world, transform the world in the way only you can. And so if you don't create and develop this ability to communicate and connect, all the gifts, all the talent, all the special messages, all the impact that you have within you to make a difference in the world will be limited a bit by your ability to access your voice, and your voice that we all need so, so much. So I will tell you just this little bits of next steps where we go with this work is that we actually start playing with language, whatever the language is. We hang out on the vowels, right? We learn to play with the consonants, right? We learn tone. We learn all these different dynamics of ways you can learn to play and emphasize and enjoy communicating, and other people will enjoy your communication by how you learn to play with your voice and play with language and allow the fullness of who you are to go out into the world and connect.
I love that. And if you guys are, I'm just going to side note here. If you guys want to connect, you get to. This is the coolest part. So Minette, please share how they can reach out to you.
So it's fairly easy to remember, Your Voice Connection. That is my website, but we have a UPC code here that will connect you directly to an opportunity to connect with me so that we can actually share our voices and communicate on a call. So you can ask questions, find out what more you'd like to learn about this. It will not be a sales call. It's a discovery, it's a communication, it's a connection where I can explain more of how we do and what we do. And if you're interested in learning more and doing more and learning more and having more power in your voice, we can talk about those opportunities that we have.
I love it. Minette, thank you so much for sharing that with everyone, because truthfully, even now as I step into the rest of my day, hopping on calls, I'm tutoring some kids this afternoon. I know that my presence will have been changed just by this short conversation. So I can only imagine the type of transformation that you can provide in a one-on-one connection call for these people who are ready to make a stand and to elevate their voice and to really emerge as the person who they're supposed to be, who they were always meant to be. You mentioned playfulness and simply fullness. I think this is a really important part of tapping into who we are and showing up authentically so you can connect in a way that is not only emotional, but physical and leveraged by a resounding yes within your voice. And like you say, your voice. So with that, I invite you all to join the conversation, to subscribe, because conversations like this are happening every single week. We are exploring, what does it look like to show up? What does it look like to be authentic? And remembering that if William Shakespeare is saying all the world is a stage and we are merely players, then what I'm saying about you're never not marketing is not new. And we need to continue to explore what this looks like for ourselves and the people around us so we can create a world in which we are joyfully living.
I do want to say, Shauna, because it is my authentic self. There is so much in the world right now that needs your voice so that we can be open, sharing, connecting, respectful, communicative, open, authentic people that can connect and be and make the change for our social justice, our equity, our respect for each other, our human dignity. And there's so much you can offer to bring that and make that a reality.
I'm going to just say, period. That's the end. I hope you all will join us next time. We'll chat soon.